When we look at recovery management as a model, when we talk about how is it different than sort of treatment as usual on this issue, one is that the folks that are beginning to sort of articulate what this model will look like in the future is we have very recovery-focused anti-stigma campaigns. We have campaigns really identifying sort of early intervention. What do you think this has done for the treatment of diabetes in the United States and hypertension? Do you have analogy when we talk about these very assertive campaigns? What do you think we've done in terms of breast cancer in the United States? This massive level of education. And by the way, I'm talking about in a lifetime, in 25 or 30 years, you could go back. I mean, in my childhood, cancer was not even hardly talked about out loud. And this was a sense of enormous shame and stigma attached to cancers in families. And you sort of found out kind of by word of mouth after people had died. But this was not something, particularly a condition openly talked about. And what about today? I mean, what's the pink ribbon campaign done for breast cancer in the United States? I mean, what would the equivalent of that look like for alcohol and drug dependence in the United States? We're beginning to talk about what would that look like, that same kind of level of resources put in. Is anybody familiar with the Recovery is Everywhere campaign? If not, can I just encourage you, go to recoveryiseverywhere.com or .org. Do you mind know? I can't remember which it is. Recoveryiseverywhere.com, or I can't remember if it's com or org. But you'll get an idea. This is a program called Dawn Farm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, who launched a very assertive anti-stigma campaign to really alter the perception of addiction, recovery, and treatment in their community. And they've done a marvelous job, and you can go and see all of the posters that they've used in that campaign. They've also they've recruited a select number of local people who in a long ongoing series kind of put a face and voice on recovery in the local newspapers as part of the story. It's pretty remarkable. Assertive models of community outreach. I'm going to give you some descriptions of these shortly, particularly targeting hospitals, health clinic, workplace, schools, community centers. If the hospital and the doctor's office are very good sites for us in terms of early intervention with adults, what about schools? Really working with student assistance programs around doing early screening and identification and referral. Working with employee assistance programs. I am a real fan of jail-based outreach programs. I began my career in 1969 as an outreach, what we called then a street worker. And there weren't any treatment programs. You work with addicts on the streets. I worked in shooting galleries, and I worked in pool halls, and I worked in wino bars, and I would have probably 40 or 50 houses in the course of 3 or 4 days that I would constantly cycle in and out of. Pick up messages in pool halls of where people in trouble that I needed to go make connections with and that kind of thing. I made jail rounds twice a day, every day for 4 years. And a whole lot of the people in recovery that came out of that were people who their first encounter was me talking with them through bars in a jail cell, in a drunk tank in some cases. I learned, believe me, I did. No, I think half of what I learned in the jail cells there, and the other half I learned it working in detox, right? It's a little different. Everything I learned in kindergarten. Mine was sort of detox. The jail outreach programs are a great way to reach people before the court machinery will find people and then legally get them to us. You're going to find a whole lot of people in jails. So the programs where we've got aggressive outreach programs going in, particularly when we've got indigenous people in recovery going into those jails who know an awful lot of people in those jails. Are you with me? And who were there as a person in recovery, who can tell their story and offer kind of living proof, in the eyes of a whole lot of people who really don't believe long-term recovery is possible. They see somebody in recovery and they're trying to figure out what their hustle is, right? And when they finally figure out that there's something real behind that apparent hustle, they begin to rethink that and open up some of those opportunities. We've reached, in the last 5 years, a lot of people in the United States through these jail outreach programs. I'm a real fan of them. Let's go on and talk about, I'm going to come back to this when we talk about motivation around outreach and kind of how it functions.